on the court, you can see body language.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of times coaches and parents think that they're not trying. I heard you out there hustling more. But when your mind feels like you're not enough or you don't believe in yourself, when your mind is telling you other things, your body cannot keep up.
Hey everybody, I'm Misha Horsey. This is The Business of Basketball. I'm so excited for this conversation with Julie Korioth. She has created an app that I'm so excited to talk about. She is a mental health professional, and we're here to talk about the mental health field and how it directly relates to the performance of basketball athletes. We met at a camp in Ohio, and the beauty of this podcast is a lot of times our guests we meet through basketball. The beauty of basketball. So we'll talk a little bit more about your story. And if someone is looking to work with athletes, particularly with mental health, we'll talk about the pathway to do that. So Julie, tell me about your pathway, your experience within mental health. What attracted you to specifically work with athletes? And tell me, I guess, the inspiration behind your community, Nui community.
Yeah, great. Well, thank you for having me on.
Yeah.
I was very curious about mental health when I was younger, just from my own struggles. We didn't even know what that meant. Like the word mental health was never even a word. I just knew that I was struggling with some sadness and anxious feelings. And so I started seeing my high school counselor, and she was very helpful. And then in college, I did the same thing. And my college counselor suggested therapy. And I was like, what is this therapy? And I went, and it really changed my life. It was the first time I got to kind of express all the thoughts and feelings that were going on inside of me and having somebody help me navigate that path. So I went on then to get my master's in counseling because I knew that I wanted to help others because it was so helpful for me. And with Nui, the reason I decided to focus on athletes is because, well, I have two young kiddos. And my son, I've learned a lot around sports and basketball, and specifically when we put him into select basketball when he was young. I've learned a lot about that, and we have chosen to do things differently with my daughter, because of it. But I really started to understand that at such a young age, these young athletes, I just wasn't seeing the joy that you would think that young kids should have at that age. And so I started doing research around mental health and athletes, started learning that by the age of 14, 70% of our 14-year-olds are dropping out of sports.
Wow.
I learned that 2022 was the deadliest year due to death by suicide amongst college athletes. And I was concerned about our children's future and generations to come. And so focusing on mental health, mental performance, really how can we be proactive and educating our kids on what they can do to support their mindset during this time, because kids are starting at age 5 and 6. They're getting, starting their stats even at that age.
Yeah.
And so the pressure is on.
Yeah. Tell me what, throughout your research, what is causing, right, like this crisis, I believe, within these young athletes in there, because obviously it gets in the way of their performance. So what are you noticing? What is it? The parents' pressure? Is it social media?
Good question. Well, I think as parents, we are just wanting to do the best for our children.
Yeah.
And so when you start to sign your children up for sports and they get interested in it, and, they start at this young age, it's a way for the parents and kids to connect. It's a way to kind of go and get excited about things, connect with other parents. Obviously, sports provides so many benefits for these young children, but I think you don't realize as a parent what you're getting into when you start paying all this money.
Yeah.
And so then you're feeling the pressure because you're paying all this money. And then there's this kind of natural evolution of when you start to feel that pressure, you put that on your children, and sometimes you don't even realize it.
Right.
It's all comes from a good place, but it sometimes can end up changing the dynamic of what was just supposed to be like simple and fun to this pressure cooker when you're paying like a couple grand a season.
I think like now that basketball, or I would say sports in general, but particularly basketball, because the podcast is about basketball, but there has been this sort of pay to play experience, right? Where you have to have money to participate, and it's a lot of money to participate. And so I think what you're saying within that is like, if I'm paying for this, you better be performing, right? Like, it's like I'm putting so much into it. You better be invested in it.
Yeah.
And that sort of sometimes unspoken pressure. And I think within that pressure, that's the statistics that you're seeing.
Well, and it's the time.
Yeah.
So as parents, you start putting in so much time and driving your children to all of their different events and things they have going on. And then you have more than one child, or some people do. And then, so, parents are feeling this pressure, they're working, they're parenting, they are driving everywhere.
Yeah.
And and you don't mean to, but I think it can affect the kids, and definitely puts that pressure on them.
I want to go back to the beginning of when you got your degree at St. Edward's, right? You got your degree in counseling.
Mm-hmm.
Did you know, when you were in college, do you know the options, or you sort of researched it right after your experience, like you said, with your kids? Was there any exposure, right, of the possibilities of working with athletes in connection with your degree?
Yeah, I just always have, I think, asked a lot of questions and tried to figure things out.
Mm-hmm.
And so whenever I was researching, universities here in Austin, St. Edward's had a great program.
Nice.
And so that's just kind of how I navigated that. And when I graduated, I had like my son at that time, and he was a year old. And when I was kind of doing these internship therapy sessions, I realized at that time I was having a hard time separating being a therapist and going home and not taking that with me. So I graduated and then decided to take more of a life coaching approach, just because it's really kind of help navigating people along with where they are.
Mm-hmm.
And, and stuff gets brought up from the past, but it's not kind of that intensity that we need therapists for,
Yeah.
So the deeper issues of what people are going through. Yeah.
And what does it take to be a life coach? Is there a certification?
I really don't think you need to have a certification, to be honest with you. I do. I gotten a few over the years. The last one I received was my coaching certificate in nutrition from INN in New York. And that was so informative. But yeah, for me, it's important to keep up to date with those, just having like certificates and things that, it helps educate you on how to best serve people.
Yeah, and that entails what necessarily? Like, it's obviously helping people with their life and, whatever struggles that come with them probably finding out who they are even. And so what else does it entail?
A lot of the exercises I go over with are, what's our belief system? Beliefs create thoughts.
Yep.
Which create feelings inside of our bodies, and then, produces action and result. And so I really kind of go over those areas and how we can, work on that belief, and also give people the tools like breath work and meditation and, affirmations in a sense. And affirmations I like to be real clear about, like, you can sit there and say, I'm the best basketball player on the team. But if you don't believe that, and that's something that feels false, then you're not going to execute in a way that you want. So it's really breaking down, like, how do you, I don't craft positive affirmations for people, but how do you break that down into and almost like an action affirmation, and how can that serve you? So, I like to give people a toolbox of things that they can use, when not even just with sports, yet of course like a pregame and an in-game and post-game and things that they can do, but really this is meant to support them in life.
Yeah.
And I think I forgot to answer your question earlier where you asked me about my degree and how I got into sports, but really with sports, it came about through this journey of having kids and this time whenever we were trying to navigate my son's like being on select teams and what that looked like at that time.
Yeah, and tell me more about that. Like, what are some of the things that you saw? Like, what was happening?
Well, with like good intentions, I think coaches are out there and have these kids that most of the time they've been a team for, quite some time, maybe 6, 7 years old. So when these athletes come on at a later age, which I didn't realize 11 was.
Yeah. These kids are starting 5 years old.
And these teams have already kind of been formed and playing together. And the coaches may not say to these athletes, like, these teams have been playing together. It's going to take some time for you as a player for us to kind of fit that in, when you're going to be playing. And then some of these athletes just find themselves sitting out on the bench because they haven't been playing with the teams.
Yeah.
And they don't know why. And so there's just a lack of communication, I think, not with bad intention, but I think that it's just having these conversations of, okay, when you start select, it's different. There's more intensity around it. And this is as a coach, maybe like, this is what this will look like.
Yeah.
It may take some time for you to be more of a full-time player, but I believe in you and I want to see you work hard and I'm going to help you develop.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And that just didn't happen in our case.
And then what are, I guess, while he was on the team or while he was in competition, what are some of the things that you saw him do? Was it he was getting anxious? Was he self-doubt? Was it self-doubt or negative talk where you were like, okay, actually I can do something with this and I can not only help my son, but I can help other athletes? What was that like aha moment?
Yeah, that aha moment is whenever you see your kids and their personality is feeling low. There was just a change in his spirit that was very noticeable. And on the court, you can see body language.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of times coaches and parents think that they're not trying. Why aren't you out there hustling more? But when your mind feels like you're not enough or you don't believe in yourself, and I'm not saying that specifically for my son, like I would definitely want him to be able to speak on, his experience. But when your mind is telling you other things, your body cannot keep up.
Yeah.
Your body is not going to be explosive and dynamic if your mind's saying, the coaches don't want to play me because I'm not good.
Yeah. I see it all the time with the kids I train.
Oh, I'm sure you do.
I see it all the time. And we've done some things, like I'm no, professional in that way in terms of identifying what you're talking about, like being able to really identify it quickly. But as a former player, I can identify with the feeling.
Yeah.
And I think people who want to get in basketball, but particularly in this field, they'll be able to see you and hear your story and be like, oh yeah, I can identify with that. I will want to help someone in this way. And so your story is really important. But talk about Nui a bit more, about your community that you have. You also have mentorship, and it's also an app. So how did you create an app? Was it expensive? Did you get support in creating this business? Like, tell me about that.
Oh, Misha, it's been a long road.
Yeah.
But, I think that's important to say, being an entrepreneur, because it is. And you just can't give up because it is. There's challenging times, there's beautiful times, and it's a roller coaster ride for sure.
Yeah.
So I was able to raise a little bit of money,
Nice.
and I worked with the company Astronomic. They were great. They were great, helping me produce the first part of the app.
Okay.
And yeah, and the app includes a small library of stories from former athletes, trainers, like Ganna Baker, who we
Nice.
know,
Yep.
and really talking about like with Ganna and his is unbreakable confidence. We have Kate Nifton. She actually just rode for the United States Olympics on there, and she
That's so
talks
cool.
about eating, and how she had some disordered eating, and her nutritionist and therapist and what they suggest. So, really trying to hit on areas that athletes may struggle with and talk about failures and triumphs and mental techniques that they use. So then younger players or even players of their age, like, oh, wow, I didn't realize that that's something that you could do to support your mind game. And so we really want to like keep growing our library of stories
Yeah.
in order to best support the athletes. But also on there, if they want to learn more about, like, let's say box breathing, then there's an AI component and they can research it. And then there is a way that they can set up routines. So they can go in and set up meditation every day if they want for 5 minutes. I always say start small, like 1% every day when you're not used to working on your mind. That's great. Like 1%'s fine. Just do 5 minutes. Do it when you're brushing your teeth. Like whatever way you can just start incorporating a little bit to support your mind, you'll see like changes over time.
I love that you have been able to connect to the athletes with storytelling.
Mm.
I think they can be able to instantly sort of identify with the story. And I mean, folks are always on computers, on their phones anyway. So I love your method. I think that it could be more impactful to sort of relate to someone else's story.
I think that people really do want to support and help see a change in where the mental aspect of the game and really support young athletes now.
Yeah.
And I do think earlier, like you asked about social media. Yeah, social media I think plays a big part. There's stats being thrown out there of, like the top 20 or 100 that aren't necessarily true. And other players see this and then they think they're not enough.
The rankings are killing youth sports. The culture, it really, really is. I mean, these kids are getting ranked from 3rd grade at these exposure camps, tournaments, events. And it in addition to the parents, it also puts pressure on the kids because the kids they have social media as early as 9. And so they're looking at this and they're like, well, my name is not on here. I'm not enough.
Yeah.
And then you get that narrative of I'm not enough that early.
Yeah.
And that's dangerous.
And it stays with you.
Yeah.
Yeah. It really is doing a disservice.
It is. It is. It is. So if I'm an athlete, walk me through the process of joining NUI.
Yeah. Download NUI Sport. It's NUI Sport. All we need is your email address, and then it will log you in through the steps.
Nice.
And so we have the app, but along with the app, we have a program. We customize it for universities or for camps. I do some where I met you, like doing some speaking engagements for camps. So there's different ways that you can get involved with NUI.
Nice. And tell me about your partnerships with universities.
Yeah.
Tell me about your work with them.
Yeah, right now I'm working with the men and women's soccer team at a university here in East Austin called Houston-Tilston. And that looks like I go to home games and I do pregame routines and in-game routines with them. I go in weekly and we talk about mindset. I give them the tools, like I said, the toolbox and techniques that they need to, be more confident, believe in themselves, teamwork.
Yes.
Communication. So a lot of different just aspects of what it takes to work on the mindset along with the body.
Yeah. We call it like, mental training, or we say like the inner coach, inner game. And I think, a lot of players who typically join our program is not just about skill, it's about confidence. And there's so many athletes who are struggling with confidence. Why do you think that's the case, and how can they increase their confidence?
Oh, it's that internal narrative that you're talking about.
Yeah.
It really, a lot of times people don't even recognize it because we do have this internal narrative that's on this like feed loop. And so when they're sitting there telling themselves the same thing, that, you know, I'm not enough, or uh, I'm not meant to be here, or I always mess up during the games, or I always miss my free throws in the games, but not at practice. I do better at practice than I do in game. And when they're not aware, there's not going to be change in confidence. So the most important thing that athletes and people in general can do is to become aware of that narrative. Just hear yourself when, things aren't going the way you were hoping them to be.
Yeah.
Um, and when we can become aware of what we're saying, we can start to change that narrative. But it takes time and patience, and it's not something that can just happen overnight. It's just like when you learn to play basketball, right? You barely dribble this ball in the beginning.
Yeah.
You kind of learn to dribble, but you're real clumsy. You definitely don't have like ball handling skills at that time.
Yep.
Your body's not fully developed. You don't have the physicality of it. Well, it's the same thing learning about the mental aspect of everything. It's just becoming aware of your thoughts and your narrative. And there is more to it, but just I think that this is a really solid place to start.
So what's missing? What are coaches, trainers, parents, what are we not doing for our athletes? Why is the statistics that you mentioned earlier so high?
Yeah.
Like what's missing? What are we not doing to support our athletes?
Well, I think that there's a lot of burnout when you start something and you're doing it year round. There comes a point where, our bodies and minds just may burn out. If you're going to choose to go the select path at such a young age and you're not going to focus on any other sport, what are you doing on the side to be able to enjoy life and have fun?
Yeah.
And even their bodies, I spoke with one of the athletic trainers here in Texas. And they are noticing that their bodies are wearing out earlier, And so that's why studies do suggest that you learn to play, you have another sport on the side. You move your body in different ways. That when you're younger, that's the best time to do that. And there obviously comes a time when you need to become a little bit more specialized when you're older. Not when you're younger.
Yeah.
And I think with coaches and parents, I think communication is key. I know it may be hard to navigate all the players that you have, but it can be if you notice a player that has that spirit in them to hustle and they're not hustling. Why aren't they hustling?
Yeah.
It's not that they don't want to please you. They don't want to hear their parents say, "Why aren't you hustling?"
Yeah.
Yeah,
because they're going to say it.
They're
almost the whole game.
Exactly. They don't want to hear their parents on the sidelines like saying things in the stand and their coach is getting upset with them. So why? They're kids they want to please.
Yeah.
And they want to do their best. And when they feel like they're not living up to a coach's expectations or parents' expectations, then we're doing them a disservice because it's just a game at the end of the day.
Yeah. And we're helping them for the game of life too.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right.
So our podcast is about the business of basketball, particularly about careers, right? And how you can create a sustainable career with the game you love, right? How can you have your dream job in basketball I think you've done it through the entrepreneurial route, and throughout that experience and that pathway, you've also worked with universities. So you have these partnerships, which is really cool for someone looking at this and listening. It's like, even if, and I do have my degree, I may not be an entrepreneur, but I can still maybe be a professor, right, within sports psychology. So there's options. So how are you creating sort of a sustainable career for yourself within the industry?
Well, I've had to adapt and change paths a little bit. When I first started, I had high hopes of raising money and building a team and really being able to push the app in a different way than what I had envisioned.
Yeah.
And I think that that's really important when you start anything like this. You have to sometimes be adaptable and see what doors open, because change is okay. I had people asking for more and for the program and, asking me to help with their athletes. And I always wanted this to be more of a community, but it started to evolve in that way, um, really very naturally.
Yeah.
So that was kind of beautiful. And I would love to be able to do all the things, but that's not sustainable.
Yes. Trust me, I know.
So it's led me on on a path where the growth is slower than what I had initially hoped for. But now looking back on it all, it was the perfect timing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's the beauty of it too.
It really is.
In the journey, just like being in the journey versus being, thinking in the future so much. I think to have a vision is important, but to also appreciate where you are is really gratifying too when you recognize what you've accomplished.
Yeah.
So I always have to remind myself that too. But yeah, I think that any entrepreneur, it's almost like sports, right? It's synonymous in the way of like you're going to meet some challenges along the way, and as long as you have your faith and you can connect to that, I think everything else will feel like there's a purpose to it too. So if I'm a athlete who just graduated and I got my counseling or psychology degree, and I'm like, what do I do with this? I want to be in the game. I want to be in sports. I want to be in basketball. What are their next steps?
If they just graduated, I think it's one, figuring out, well, do you want to be in the classroom, like you said, or do you want to be on the court with a team? Do you want to work with individual athletes? Do you want to go and speak on a basketball circuit? So, really trying to figure out what it is that you want out of it. And if it's starting off with a team, I think it's okay to go into like different select teams and say, hey, this is what I'm doing. I'm interested in working with your basketball team. You might hear a lot of no's. I've heard so many no's over my a period of working as an entrepreneur, but you keep going. That's what's so important. Like just keep going, because you'll find a yes. So I think it's exploring different, setting up a list for yourself. Who are the teams? What's my goal? Like, who are the teams I want to work with? And then individually, I think parents really are more open to individual help with their kiddos. I think a sports psychologist is really important for athletes. And I'll tell you why. Usually they understand their way of thinking. And that doesn't mean like a traditional therapist won't work. I'm not saying that. I just think that sometimes sports, if it's wanting to kind of focus on both the person as an individual and their sport, that's why I think a sports psychologist is super helpful. So I'd say for them, like, go to all these tournaments, like pass out your cards to parents. There's different spaces for a sports psychologist.
Yeah. Are there any resources that help you along the way that you can share with our listeners, whether it be certifications that you look for, or anything along the way, even for learning too, right? Just like getting some more information on how to be skilled at what you're doing. Are there any resources that you can share?
Well, there are so many resources out there.
Yeah. Yeah.
I'll tell you what, sometimes it feels overwhelming
Yeah.
to me
Mm-hmm.
because they've all got really good marketing,
Yeah.
like top notch. So I'd say, what do you want your niche to be?
Mm.
What do you want to specialize in? And if you want to be a sports psychologist that also can help with nutrition, you know, look at those schools, integrative nutrition. New York, that's the one like that I, did virtual webinars with.
Mm-hmm.
And that was fantastic. So figure out like what you want to specialize in and then go online, or if you want to be in person, then that narrows it down for you because then you can find locally what offers that specific niche. But yeah, I think it's really understanding where you want to work as an individual, like what sector of it.
That's good. Yeah, I think specialization is really important because then you can sort of figure out a pathway. I think you get overwhelmed when there's so many options,
Yeah.
right? So where can people find you, can find what you're doing in the community? And also, too, how can people support, right? I think your initiative is important, and I think more people need to have exposure and awareness to what you're doing. So where can people find you, and how can people support what you're doing?
Yes, well, you can find me at, you can email me at julie@getnui, GETNUI.com. My LinkedIn page is Julie Korioth, and our Instagram page is Nui Community. So any of those areas, reach out to me and I'll get back with you. And then how can people support? Well, a few different ways. We're looking for great content. So if you are, a college athlete, former pro, a coach, athletic trainer, sports psychologist, like reach out to me because we want to add awesome content for these young athletes. And there's the content piece too. Listen, Nui Sport, our app is so new. I always call it like we're at the crawling stage. We're
Yeah.
not infancy anymore. But this was created so we can now build it from our athletes. So, and coaches. So I just encourage you to go and download the app and then email me, or like I said, all the ways you can reach out to me on everything that's wrong with it. Like, this is the time. You're like, I need to know,
Yeah.
what can we do to best serve you? Because that's what we're here to do, is to be of service. So if we can get people downloading this, coaches using it. I don't think I mentioned earlier, there's a group feature. So as a coach, you can connect with your players and they can send you in the routines. If you set them up, say, hey,
that's cool.
I want you to, do the 5-minute meditation every day, just 5 minutes. They go on there and do it and they send it, to your group. And so then it's just an easy way to kind of say, hey, we're just checking in on each other. So yeah, download the app. Let me know what you think.
And your website is?
www.getnui.com.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Julie, thank you so much.
Thank you.
This has been so cool.
Yeah.
I learned some things, and I'm definitely going to tell my athletes about it.
Okay.
There's a few that I'm thinking of as you were talking. I'm like, this could be really good for them. So I think what you're doing is so impactful.
Thank you.
And I appreciate what you're doing, because the generation right now of just like I said, social media and comparison, and just like where the youth basketball culture is going, it's just it's in a scary place.
Yeah.
And I think because kids are not going out often to just have natural play, their play is within these high, stress environments. And so it does a disservice to our youth. And we need them because they are the future. So thank you for the work that you're doing.
Yeah,
I
thank
appreciate it. Please go follow Julie and what she's doing. It's so important. Again, this is The Business of Basketball. I'm Misha Horsey. If you learned anything from this episode, please leave us a review. Let us know some of the gems that Julie dropped and things that help you in your journey and finding your dream job in basketball. See you on the next one.